Hello, welcome to March 3rd, 2022. My name is Kurt, and this is my daily Good Life meditation, an exercise that I do every morning just after I wake up to remind myself of my life objectives and principles and to see how I'm doing applying these to the challenges and the opportunities. Let's begin with last night and yesterday. Usual night, but there was a difference. Usual insofar as to bed by 9 p.m., solid, deep sleep all through the night until it's not, which usually happens sometime between 3 a.m. and when my alarm goes off at 5 a.m. and I wake up and either I have a fitful toss and turn for the last anything from 15 minutes, 30 minutes to 2 hours, or kind of like a waves washing in and out, a consciousness type of a thing. Or I just stare out the window in the night and I see watch Venus slowly make its way up. I can tell when Venus gets to a particular point above the mountains, I know that's when the alarm will go off. But last night was different. Not different insofar as getting a good night's sleep. No, that didn't happen. But I did wake up, and it was an abrupt waking up, probably an hour before the alarm went off. But it was like this. It was like floating on the ocean. Just kind of floating on the ocean. Like one of those no sensation tanks, right? Salty water. Sensory depredation. It was a very nice thing. I felt really good, like floating on salt water. And then suddenly, I thought of a meeting at work, and the salt water evaporated, and I was left on a solid rocky surface with, desert landscape and the sun bearing down. It's like, hey, you're not going to rest now. And I realized, oh, well, there you go. I've suspected all along that work was the culprit. It is work. And I mentioned yesterday that my ability to sleep gets better over the weekend, especially when I have a 3-day weekend. So I know what the reason is. It's my job. But why? I've always had a hard job. Japan was easy. Japan was, I didn't like my work in Japan because it wasn't challenging. And now it's more than challenging enough. But all in all, I'm just finished. And Yumiko and I talk about this, and we're both just at an age now where we don't want to work anymore. So we just have to find our way to retirement. That's just what we have to do. And I'm sure that people my age everywhere encountered the same challenge at roughly the same period. It's why so many people do retire at sometime around age between 60 and 65. You just had enough. There was another thing that happened yesterday that I'll mention. How do I phrase it? What do I do with it? Okay, I can employ the principle of the recognition of true limits and true opportunity. I know, and I've known for a long time, that I'm vulnerable to not being able to control myself after work and until bedtime. I just put so much into my job, and I'm so spent when the day's done, and I'm very careful to manage my activities so that I can have a clear shot from finish the day, shut down the computer, collect the dogs, my book, go for a nice hour-long walk with the dogs, come home, take a shower, watch an episode of Midnight Diner while my wife cooks dinner, sit down to dinner with the family. About as soon after the meal is done, I'm exhausted. And Yumiko even knows, and we can get about half an hour of TV watching together. I watch my Midnight Diner for half an hour, and we watch something else together for half an hour, so about an hour of that. Then it's about 8:30, 8:45, and I'm done, and I go to bed. Anyway, Emily is working on some stuff for school, some paper, and she needs some paperwork, and she's using my computer here. She's been doing this for like the reason she's using my computer is that she needs my input. And last night and the night before, she came to do that at my most vulnerable time. And yesterday and the day before were really tough days at work. And she's used to this. She knows how I am, and I'm not bad. I don't yell at anybody, and I don't throw things or anything like that. I'm just exhausted, and sometimes I'm not in good spirits. If the course goes smoothly, if I can go smoothly from shutting on the computer to walking the dogs to having a shower and watching my little show and eating my meal, then I'm in pleasant spirits. But if anything upsets that trajectory, that glide path to bed, I'm not in good spirits. And I'm not mean, like I said. I just am a grouch, And last night in particular, I knew it was happening. I came back from the dog walk, and she was set up in here, and she had adjusted my chair, and she had left her crap on my desk, and you know what kids do, right? I mean, moving the cheese, I think, right? Upsetting my little world. And she had kind of thrown up her hands and was asking me questions about stuff on the forums. And her English is fine. She's a native speaker now, without question. But it was just a matter of, she wasn't reading the forums carefully. And sometimes as young people do, right? Rather than try to figure it out, let's just ask Dad and Mom for help. She was asking me for help with stuff, and I was happy to do so. But I was clearly tired, right? And I couldn't mask that, and I tried my best. I didn't engage in the Feast of Offal. But while I was sitting here, she was at that chair and on the computer, and I was sitting here. I was telling myself, "Wow, Kurt, you're really in an area of limit. This is about the best you can do." And so I told her. I didn't, make a big deal of it, but I said, Emily, I appreciate the effort that you're doing to manage your own schooling and all these activities, and I'm happy to help you out. I'm just a little bit tired, and it was a tough day, and so I'm sorry if I'm kind of a grouch. And she turned and said, yeah. She knows. True limits, true opportunity, avoiding the Feast of Offal, and that which must be borne. And the other thing that I have to bear is the fact that I'm not in a position yet to pull the ripcord and jump out of the plane, or jump out of the plane first, then pull the ripcord. That's a bit better work breakdown structure. Got to get her finished with school and out on her own safely. Then you meet when I can go. And every year we wait, our retirement just gets better. But I feel like, sometimes I feel like, man, I don't know if I'm going to survive this. I mean, literally, like, could I die of overwork, or contribute to the great decline of my health? There was one more thing. What was it? It just popped up in my head. I wanted to say, what was it? There it was. Like one of those whack-a-moles. And it's gone. But it was actually the main thing I wanted to talk about this morning. It's gone. Oh well. Almost. I see it. Almost, but I can't. Okay. Let's do the good life meditation. First, my 7 objectives. These are, number 1, to be always ready to die. Number 2, to make good and effective use of time. 3 is to develop and maintain good and sound life principles. 4 is to cultivate good emotional reactions. 5, to perform good actions. 6, to recognize my true limits and my true opportunities. And 7, to do just one thing at a time and to do that thing slowly. Now my 30 objectives, or principles. 1, the principle of war. To always be out to get things that I believe are true. To work to prove that they are not true. 2, the principle of reason, and the subprinciples of honesty, objectivity, and doubt, which are the attitude and framework and the approach to life that I take, particularly in the pursuit of that war against what I believe is true, and what others tell me if they think is true, if it's something important. Number 3 is the homunculus, the concept of my consciousness, and namely, the fact that consciousness can't escape my head, or at least there's no good evidence to believe that it can escape, and that it will die with me. Next comes the principle called the Anchorhold, the suggestion that our consciousness is trapped, like on a little rock in the sea, where you can't swim. It's too dangerous. And there are other people on their own rocks, and we can't reach each other. But we can shout and wave at one another across the waters. But each of us has to suffer exposed upon that rock as the tide rises and falls, and the weather comes and the sun beats down. Each of us ultimately quite alone in both life and death. Although in death it's even more than it's not even alone. Alone is wishful thinking, because death is just a big nothing. Next comes the home of good and evil, the suggestion that concepts of right and wrong are mere opinions that we maintain. They don't reflect any absolutes in the universe. Next comes the principle of purpose. The purposes in my life are to be a good family man, to be a good member of my community, virtuous, pursuing the well-being and happiness of thinking creatures, and to pursue the mission of sharing the message in my book, Going Alone. And that message is the good life, the precise thing I'm talking about right now. Next comes the atomic principle. Everything is made of little bits and pieces. So are we. It's good to remember, because things that are made of pieces tend to fall to pieces. Next comes the principle of nature. Everything has some particular nature, the way that it is, its spin and motion, its attitude, like my nature to be utterly exhausted after work until bedtime, and to have to walk a careful course to get pleasantly through the evening without becoming a grouch. In my youth, my young adulthood, I was more than a grouch. I would actually get upset. I wasn't terrible, but, I was vulnerable, and I would engage in the Feast of Offal, I don't do that anymore, thankfully. Glad I waited to have Emily. I'd hate to have her have to experience that longer, which she didn't have to experience much of it because she was so little before I outgrew it. Next comes the pirate ride. That's the next principle. The suggestion that free will is an illusion, that we are influenced by so much of the universe as to practically render our agency null. Then comes maturity and the subprinciples of wisdom and fortitude. We are mature when we wisely remember our experiences and have the strength, the fortitude to do better. Next comes the social principle. We are social creatures. We need each other. It's not good to go alone, even though that's the title of my book. It's not the punchline, though. The punchline is anything but alone. Next comes the principle of public speaking, a suggestion to be very careful in every way that we communicate, our speaking and our writing, the vocabulary that we use, so that we can more often and more accurately communicate what we really want to say, and to be a very careful listener, and to never, ever, ever engage in gossip, which is a quite deadly sin. Next comes the principle of temperance and the sub-principles of suffering, simplicity, and apathy. Because a temperate life involves some denial, self-denial, which is a form of suffering in a way, because we want it. And a temperate life is a simple life. And apathy is what we employ to manage the things that are outside of our control. I had a moment to think about apathy yesterday, but I won't talk about it here. It's just not the right venue. It's not soon enough. No, not soon enough. You know how they say in those jokes? They say, too soon? That's what it is. Too soon? It's too soon. Next comes, the next principle is called the horror show. A reminder that life is just chock full of terrible things. And then comes another principle called that which must be borne, carried. The horror show is something we have to carry, something we have to live with. That's why I put it right after the horror show, so I could say the horror show, that which must be borne. The fact of the horror show is one of those things. Also, all of the things, the responsibilities that we take on in life, especially when we choose to settle down and have family, and kind of seal the deal for ourselves for decades. Excuse me. Then comes the Feast of Offal, which is the waste and byproduct of our intemperate living. When we spill our upset out into the world and smatter it upon others, it's not a good thing to do. Likewise, when others do the same, but we choose to consume it, gobble it up, because we're kind of there's a vicarious enjoyment that they're the ones suffering and not us. And I don't want to engage in that either. Neither form of the feast, being on the giving or the receiving end, is healthy. Next comes the principle of distraction and the principle of agency in the great indifference. Our lives are filled with distractions, from our jobs to our families, our recreation, hobbies, everything. In part because that's how we live, but mainly that's the thing. But also it serves a useful purpose of distracting us from the emptiness of the universe, which yawns like an inescapable void all around us. And it's that apprehension that reminds us, or suggests to us, or confirms perhaps, that we are alone, and we don't want to know that. And that we will not survive our death. And we don't want to know that either. Next comes the principle of the best seat in the house. To not want to be anyone else, or be anywhere else, or be doing anything else, but to be okay with who I am, where I am, and what I'm doing. All the while striving to make things better. Next comes the principle called the Path of Wildness, which is a way to move into a new life, to create a new chapter of life by deciding it's time, deciding that we want to do something, picking out what that is, collecting facts, or picking out some options and collecting facts, and then deciding a choice. And if we can't fully make the choice, then to nudge ourselves forward with our gut feeling. That's the path. I feel myself getting ready to go back on that path again within the next couple of years as Yumiko and I plan our escape from this sane and sober life here in Southern California and get back to some simplicity in Japan. We could find that simplicity here too, but Japan's an option, so we like it. Next comes the risk of avoiding risk. The hard work of attending to the surface level activities of life, of career and education and family and home and security and all that stuff, while also attending to the deep level challenge of having a great life adventure, something that call our own, and then maybe pulling something out of that, our own story, to set down and share. Now comes sin and damnation. The things that I call sins in my life are credulity, believing things too readily; falsity, not telling the truth, or not being truthful; hope, which is a nothing burger. It's just a want, uncoupled from action. If you connect it to some sort of activity, then it's different. It's not just hope. It's motivation, it's action, it's compulsion, it's a plan. But hope alone is not worth the effort. It's nothing. Okay, I've said enough on that. Faith is another sin, where faith is belief founded on belief. And that that goes nowhere. It just sounds, it's a deepity, as William Dennett would say. It sounds heavy, it sounds deep, but it's nothing. Resting your belief on your own on the fact of the belief doesn't get you anywhere. Sin. Faith is indeed a grave sin that has somehow gained the reputation of a virtue. It's an amazing chameleon job. Wolf in sheep's clothing. Next comes authority and dogma, which are believing things because of institutions and documents and authoritative figures that suggest that it's true. And then superstition, which is, by its very definition, is hardly worth the time. And lastly, gossip, which is a grave sin, as I've said. And the consequence to any of these sins is potential damnation in the here and now, as we are left believing things that are not true, or clutching at pearls, hoping life would be different, and or worst of all, talking about others is in a way that we wouldn't want them to hear us say, to know. That's what gossip is, when we're speaking about others or communicating about others, written as well, where we would be embarrassed if they knew what we were saying. Then we're gossiping. If they wouldn't be embarrassed, that's not the case. I mean, there might be a circumstance where maybe we're embarrassed. We're like talking with the doctor about our mother's condition, our elderly mother's condition, and it's a sensitive thing. That wouldn't be embarrassed that we're talking about it. That would be uncomfortable, right? Because she overhears it, and then she hears that she has stage 4 cancer. It's not that we were talking about her necessarily for our own satisfaction. We were doing it for her welfare. That's not gossip. But if we were talking about her choice of fashion sense, that's another matter. I spent enough time on that. Complete oblivion is the next principle. The suggestion that when we die, there's nothing left. We won't see our loved ones after we're dead. We won't have a chance to make up with them, and we won't have a chance to further any justice, because we'll be nothing after we're dead. Okay, next comes, after complete oblivion, comes the great life adventure, one or more really good experiences in life that become our story. The season of philosophy is a time to set that story down, or some consequential thoughts from it. Then comes the best seat in the house, to not want to, the bullseye aim, striving for the mark but usually missing. Then the uphill climb, up. Life is a trudge. And then the arena and utility. Life is an arena for the use of our principles to do better and make things better. And then nothing is enough, a reminder that less is better, less is fine. It's kind of a lot like temperance, isn't it? I just realized that. I have to think about that. And then finally, the principle of fun, a suggestion, a reminder to enjoy life. There you go. There's my good life meditation for today. Now, let's talk about the day. I have maybe 4 meetings today. I have an interesting one with someone who reached out to me and asked to learn to be a project manager, and got permission from their boss. So I'm going to meet with them but kind of bring them into the fold of one of my projects and show them the ropes, maybe give them some tasks and help them. They want to advance their career. Good for them. So I'm going to do, that's one of it. But the thing I need to do is, okay, the one project, the thing with the training, that's just rolling now. That's rolling. I don't need to worry about that too much anymore. That one's on its way. So I need to kind of settle that in my mind. And that was a hard one. I really worked. That's one for the resume, the creation of that. The second one, the other project, now that's the main project. That one's ramping up, and I have a lot to do. I need to finish reviewing the contract, which is taking a lot of time. I have to pull the scope out. I need to reach out to the first group that we're going to work with. I need to settle with the other project manager, the vendor project manager, a complicated situation from one part, a complicated problem. And a few other miscellaneous things. It's that main one. That's the one, the complicated problem. That's the one I really need to tackle today. Ahead of. Oh, and I need to do something for the other training thing, but I can do that tomorrow. That's the main thing I need to tackle, is sort that thing out, and reach out to those first contacts. If I can do those 2 things today in addition to those meetings, then I'll be in good shape. I still won't sleep tomorrow, but so be it. That seems to be just a fact and circumstance of my life right now. Fact and circumstance. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and that's a long title. Thanks for joining me. Wish you all the best. Make it a good day. Be safe, but not too safe. I just felt like I just listed off a whole bunch of like, canned little phrases. I'm just trying to say bye-bye. Have a good day.